Hello everyone, my name is Paul Roberts and I want to tell you a most amazing story. It's a story of intrigue and illicit affairs that happened over 200 years ago, with changes in names, and it involves the Industrial Revolution in England and military service in India, the last Zulu War in South Africa, and then the greatest diamond rush that ever occurred, and then the gold rush to the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. And the identity of the hero of the story and of his parents and grandparents were all discovered using DNA. This is the story of my great-grandfather, Richard Charles Roberts. The use of DNA matches and floating trees had shown me that Richard Charles Roberts actually grew up as Luigi Pietro Rolandi, using the name Louis Roland, and his mother, who he thought was Emily Thomas, was actually Susanna Agostini, a young woman living in London who he never really met. And her mother was Alice Neve, and we had no record of her last name before we used the DNA. And finally, the DNA and matching and floating trees had shown me that the father of Luigi Rolandi was actually the son of Donato Apollinari, living in the village of Borgo Val di Taro in the Parma region of northern Italy. Borgo Val di Taro is also called Borgo Taro, and it's a beautiful little village on the Taro River in the Parma region. I visited there in 2022, and we will get to that a little later. But now I had to find out what happened in London, and why did Luigi Apollinari change his name to Luigi Rolandi, and what happened with Susan Agostini. So I went into the London records on familysearch.org looking for Apollinari. This is the beautiful and ancient village of Borgo Val di Taro in the Parma region of Italy. Luigi's father, Donato, was born here in 1799. In those days, people had many children, and there was obviously little work opportunity in the village, so Luigi left his family and the life he knew and went to England to seek his fortune. Many foreigners immigrated to England as the Industrial Revolution was creating many new job opportunities. Luigi was born in 1825, and he probably arrived in London around 1851 or early 1852 at the age of about 26. But I have not found him on the 1851 census. He settled in the Saffron Hill area of Holborn in London, and very soon he met a 24-year-old English lady named Rose Vaughan. And soon after that, Rose Vaughan was pregnant. This is the earliest record I can find of an Apollinari in London. This is the death of an infant in 1851 at Saffron Hill, and on the 6th of March 1851, Luigi Apollinari, a 7-month-old male infant, son of Luigi Apollinari, picture frame maker, died of acute hydrocephalus of 7 days duration. The mother was listed as Rose Apollinari, who was present at the death at 103 Great Saffron Hill. This is important because the baby was already 7 months old, meaning it was born around August, September 1850. And so the latest Luigi Apollinari Sr. could have arrived in London would have been in late 1849, when he was 24 years old. And Rose Apollinari is labelled as Apollinari being his wife, yet she had not married him. They later married in 1852. And just a couple of weeks after the death of the infant Luigi Apollinari, the census was taken in London for 1851. And we see that the Vaughan family lived at 103 Great Saffron Hill, where the baby died. But there's no mention of Luigi on the census. There's Daniel Vaughan, who's head of the household. He's 50 years old, silversmith, and his wife is also 50. Her name is Rose Amelia Vaughan. And the daughter, Rose Amelia, the mother of the Luigi Apollinari infant, is listed as daughter at 23 years old, a feather dyer, and there were other children. And this is the marriage certificate of Luigi Apollinari and Rose Vaughan. They were married in 1852 on December the 12th at the St. Thomas Church, the parish church of Holborn in Middlesex. And it lists Luigi Apollinari, of full age, a bachelor, picture frame maker in Saffron Hill, and his father was Donati Apollinari, a farmer. Rose Vaughan, of full age, a spinster of Saffron Hill, and her father was Daniel Vaughan, a silver cutler. There's Luigi Apollinari's ex, because he was illiterate. I suspect that they were finally compelled to marry because Rose had a daughter from Luigi, who they named Celesta, about this time. So she was probably pregnant, and perhaps her parents said, "You better get married now." On the 15th of January, 1854, Luigi and Rose had another child. They named him Anthony William. This was in the Mile End, Newtown district of Whitechapel. And the father was Luigi Apollinari and the mother Rose Apollinari, formerly Vaughan. It appears their address was 12 Dawson's Place, Whitechapel. Their first son, Luigi, had died at 7 months old, and now Anthony William died at 8 months old. This was in 1854, October, 19th of October, and he was 8 months old, son of Louis Apollinari, looking glass and frame maker. And I can't quite make out what he died of. He had something for 8 days. Don't know what that is. And then on the 19th of October, 1855, Luigi and Rose had another son, William. They named him William. And there's Rose Apollinari, formerly Vaughan, and Luigi is listed as a cabinet maker, and there's his mark, and it gives their address as 6 Chickson Street, Mile East, Newton. But just a few weeks later, little William died. He was only 14 days old, and he died of variola, the infant son of Luigi Apollinari, cabinet maker. In 1852, Luigi and Rose had a daughter, and they named her Celesta, after Luigi's mother, Maria Celesta Lazzari, back in Borgo Val di Taro. So Celesta grew up in London, and she married Edwin Cole, and these are various descendants of hers who are DNA matches with my father. There's another son through Ellen Susanna Cole, and these are the descendants through Mary Cole. If we look at Luigi Apollinari, there's my dad and the various other children in South Africa, all share DNA with Celesta Apollinari. This is the area of London that Luigi and Rose lived in. And you'll see Russell Square, the British Museum. This is Holborn, down to the Thames. And it's the exact same area that the Agostinis were living in. Susan Agostini was born and christened in that church. And there's St. Andrews, where Luigi and Rose got married. That's just 3,500 feet away between those two churches. So this is a very small area. And in the 1841 census, the Vaughan family were living here, and in 1851, they lived here on Saffron Hill, and this is where Luigi lived with the Vaughan family, and that's where their first son was born and died. And in 1861, Rose and Celeste were living here. So somewhere along the line, when Luigi had already had a few sons with Rose Vaughan, he started having an affair with a single young woman in London named Susan Agostini. And in about April-May 1857, she conceived. Luigi was 32 and Susan was 21 years old at the time. Probably around July-August 1857, there must have been great unrest in the Agostini home. Their daughter was pregnant by a married man. Her life would be ruined. She couldn't marry him, and now she was pregnant. No one would ever marry her, and how could she raise this child on her own in working-class Victorian England? We will never know what conversations took place, but I can imagine Susanna's father sitting Luigi and Susanna down and saying, "You have got to have this baby in secret, have it somewhere else, go away, have the baby, then leave the baby with the father and come back to London and don't ever tell anyone. And you will return to London as a single virgin." And this is the 1861 census, again in London, at St. Clement's and Danes in Westminster. We've seen the 1861 census in Birmingham, where Luigi Sr. has the little 3-year-old Luigi Jr., Richard Charles Roberts, and is living with Emma Thomas. And we've seen the 1861 census with the Agostini family, where Susan is living with her parents and she still has her maiden name, Susanna Agostini. And at St. Clement's and Danes in 1861, there is Rose Apollinari, wife, although her husband has disappeared. A book folder. She's 34 years old and she has a 9-year-old daughter, Celeste. So poor Rose was left behind in London. We will never know if she knew that Luigi was having an affair, if she knew he was abandoning her and going to Birmingham, but I think she didn't know, because Luigi went to Birmingham and changed his name to Rolandi, and I presume that is so that he couldn't be traced back to Rose. So he abandoned Rose to raise her daughter alone in London and went to Birmingham with Susanna Agostini. So Luigi Apollinari and his pregnant girlfriend, Susanna Agostini, escaped to Birmingham and settled on the Bullring. And on the 4th of February 1858, Susanna gave birth to a baby boy, Luigi Pietro Apollinari. The father was Luigi Apollinari and the mother Susan Apollinari, formerly Agostini. He was a picture frame maker, journeyman. And Susan Apollinari is the mother, and it gives their address, the back 21 Pershaw Street. They registered the baby on the 16th of March, 1858. I had finally found a record of the birth of my great-grandfather, Richard Charles Roberts, and he was registered at St. Martin's, which is the large church on the Bullring in Birmingham. So his stories were mostly true, but he himself did not know that he was born Luigi Apollinari, because as soon as Susan went back to London, Luigi changed his name to Rolandi, and little Luigi Pietro grew up as Luigi Pietro Rolandi. Susan remained in Birmingham at least until December of 1858, as on the 16th of December 1858 they had baby Luigi Pietro Apollinari baptized at St. Luke's Parish. This church has since been demolished and is no longer there. And the parents were Luigi and Susan Apollinari. And this again is the Rolandi map of Birmingham that I showed previously, showing where the bull ring is with St. Martin's Church, and that's where the baby was registered. The baby was born right there on Pershaw Street. And then in 1861, when the baby was 3 years old, and Emma Thomas was on the scene and Susan was back in London, that's where the Apollinari family lived. And 1871, 1881, and that's where Hawks and Rolandi had their business. I was truly amazed at this remarkable puzzle of a tree that I had been able to decipher using DNA. Richard Charles Roberts wasn't Roland, as he said, he was Rolandi, and his name was Luigi Pietro Rolandi. But even he didn't know that he was born Luigi Apollinari, and that his father had married a woman in London, had a child there, abandoned her, and came to Birmingham where his mother gave birth to him. He didn't know that Susan Agostini was his mother. And then in Richard Charles's life, he did a similar thing. He got a woman pregnant in Birmingham, Annie Hensley, and he abandoned her and ran away to a foreign country and changed his name. I thought I had discovered just about all that I could about this line now. I had little hope of finding anything more about the family in Italy because there essentially were no records searchable on familysearch.org. But I had the opportunity to visit Italy in May of 2022, and there was no way I was not going to go and visit the village where Luigi Apollinari came from. So excitedly, I planned for this trip. Originally, I was going in May 2020, and then due to COVID, delayed, and we finally went in May 22. This was my first trip to Italy, and I flew into Rome and then took the high-speed train up to Florence, and there I spent the first few nights in Lucca. I wanted to go back to Florence and do a tour and see all the touristy things, the Statue of David, etc. And I wanted to be in Lucca since Luigi Agostini came from the Lucca region, and I was pretty sure that he came from the town Bargaccia, which is above Massarosa. There it is there, Bargaccia. There's a long, winding little road that trails up the mountain to Bargaccia. So, had a wonderful time there, fantastic food, wine, cheese, and knowing that I had ancestors who came from this region. The town of Lucca is one of the oldest completely walled cities in Italy, and beautiful place to stay. I rented a car in Lucca, and then I drove up to Borgo Val di Taro, which I came up this road, and crossed a very windy little road coming up to the top of the mountains of Tuscany, and that's the border with Emilia-Romagna, and down the other side to Borgo Val di Taro, which is where Luigi Apollinari was born. now in the middle of Borgo Val di Taro, or Borgo Toro as it's also called. Standing in the sort of park, which is like the central park of the village. There's a memorial here I'm going to go and have a look at, and turn around this way. This is the hotel I'm staying in right here. This is the main street in Borgo Toro, or seems to be the main shopping street. It's now Thursday afternoon and I'm in the cemetery in Borgo Val di Taro. It was open today, and just looking around, there are many family names, many Ferraris and Spagnolis and Pissinis, but I haven't found the Apollinaris yet, so I'm going to keep looking. Just as I turn, there's Giovanni Ferrari there, born in 1929, and behind him Rosa Molinari. So many of the names of that are in the family. There's a Spagnoli, lots of Spagnolis, and this is a Ferrari as well. The Spagnoli is married into the family somewhere along the line. I've got them all on the tree, but some graves are old, back against the wall there. Many of the plaques are in the early 1800s. So all these names, but no Apollinari. It was a really wonderful experience to walk those streets of Borgo Toro and think of my English grandparents and how they thought that their family came directly from Birmingham, England, and were British, and yet they were Italian. And now I was walking on the streets of the village in Italy that those same ancestors walked on over 200 years ago. It was a really very special experience. I wandered around the village and explored the streets and took lots of photographs. And when I first arrived, the concierge in the hotel chatted with me, asking me what I was doing in the village since so few tourists come there. And I told him about my family a little. I asked him if there were any Apollinaris living in the town. And he said he didn't know, but he was a young man, and he said, "There's an old man in the town who knows everyone. He'll speak to him." And the next morning he said to me, he spoke to this old man, and he spoke to the mayor, and the mayor wants to meet me. So the mayor came to our hotel. This is him, Senor Salvatore Oppo. Very nice man. Didn't speak a word of English, so we used the concierge as a translator. And he said there were no Apollinaris living in the town, but he was going to look for me. He was going to do some research and see what he could find out. And he took my number for WhatsApp, and he said he will let me know if he discovers anything for me. Within a few months of my returning home, the mayor sent me his findings. He had found this early 19th century painting of the village of Borgo Toro. And he also had found this book titled The Ruling Class of Borgo Val di Taro, Indication of Civic Officers with Description of Coats of Arms and Genesis of Surnames from the 13th century that have disappeared or still exist today. And in the book was a section on the Apollinari family, which at first spoke about the origin of the name from the Greek Apollo, and then there was a section stating, to this family, originally from Gotra, belonged the sculptor Giovanni, a religious Dominican who lived in the 16th century, of which a valuable marble holy water font is still visible today in the church of San Domenico. Michel, rural councillor for the Villa di Gotra, was among the representatives of the community who, in 1731, swore an oath to Enrichetta, widow of Duke Antonio Farnese. A list of property owners in Borgo Val di Toro attached to a map in the mid-18th century includes Francesco, indicated at number 40. I'd had a wonderful trip to Borgo Taro, full of many videos and photographs and wonderful nostalgic memories and fantastic food. The cheeses were incredible, but I didn't find any real hard Apollinarii facts. I'd learned that in the 1500s, a papal decree, I believe it was the Council of Trent, established that the parishes would keep records of births and marriages and deaths and even census information. But in the 1800s, this was all changed to civil records. So I would be looking for parish records back in the time period of the early 1800s and the 1700s for the Apollinarii family. And I imagine sitting in the dusty, dark cellar of these old Catholic churches, looking at Latin scrolls, and with no internet access, there was no way I would be able to trace the Apollinarii records. So I thought my quest was now over. But I was wrong, and another big door was about to open. And we will learn about that in the next episode.